Hey, I'm Olivia, 34, and 3 weeks ago, my phone buzzed with a desperate call from Mom. Olivia, the company's collapsing. We're losing everything. But rewind 3 years, my parents handed their multi-million-dollar construction empire, our Puget Sound mansion, and every investment account to my younger brother, Ethan, claiming he was the future of Bennett Builders. Me? I poured 17 years into that company, working 80-hour weeks, while Ethan partied through his 20s, barely scraping by with a marketing degree. When Dad broke the news, his words stung. Ethan's a Bennett man. You'll be fine on your own. Now, they're drowning in $5 million of debt, begging me to save them. Want to know how it all crashed and burned? Drop a comment with where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear the rest of this wild ride. Growing up in Seattle, I lived in Ethan's shadow. Grandpa George started Bennett Builders in 1960, and Dad turned it into a skyscraper giant. But when Ethan was born, Dad lit up. Finally, a Bennett to carry the name. I got old books for my birthday. Ethan got a custom go-kart. It only got worse from there. Growing up in that Puget Sound mansion, I felt like a ghost in my own family. Dad's eyes sparkled for Ethan, the Bennett heir, while I was just there. For my 10th birthday, I got a used encyclopedia set. Ethan's 5th? A custom go-kart track in our backyard, built by Bennett Builders crew. Mom, Susan, tried to soften the blow, whispering, "Your dad's old school, honey. He doesn't mean it." But I saw it clear as day. Ethan was the golden child, and I'd never measure up. Still, I refused to fade away. If I couldn't win their love, I'd earn their respect. By high school, I threw myself into excellence. I led the business club, aced every class, and graduated valedictorian. Ethan? He coasted with CS, more focused on sneaking beers than studying. When I brought home perfect report cards, Mom'd say, "Nice job, Liv," before fussing over Ethan's barely passing math grade. Once, I overheard Dad laughing off Ethan's suspension for vandalism. Boys will be boys. Meanwhile, I got grounded for a week for missing curfew by 10 minutes after a late library session. The double standard burned, but I channeled it into a plan. I'd prove I belonged at Bennett Builders. I chose construction management at the University of Washington, not out of passion, but to show Dad I was serious about the family legacy. I graduated summa cum laude, top of my class. Ethan picked marketing because it was chill, squeaking by with a 2.4 GPA after 5 years. During college summers, I interned at Bennett Builders, showing up at 6 a.m., staying till midnight, learning everything: budgeting, site logistics, client pitches. Dad barely noticed, assigning me to skin old contracts while Ethan, fresh off his sophomore year, tagged along to VIP client dinners. Ethan needs real-world experience, Dad said when I asked why I was stuck in the file room. The irony was thicker than Seattle fog. Despite the snubs, I loved Bennett Builders. Grandpa's grit and Dad's ambition had built something special, and I saw its potential to lead the industry. I memorized every employee's name, from accountants to crane operators, and soaked up their insights. My senior year, I spent months crafting a proposal for a smart building division, integrating IT tech to make our projects cutting edge. I presented it to Dad at Christmas, heart-pounding. He flipped through 2 pages, muttered, "Sounds expensive," and set it aside. Later, he spent hours teaching Ethan how to schmooze clients, even though Ethan yawned through it. Mom patted my hand. "Your dad just connects better with Ethan. It's not about you." But it was. I pointed out that half the top construction firms in Seattle were run by women. She just shrugged. After graduation, I joined Bennett Builders full-time, starting in a junior role despite my degree. My salary? $45,000 less than new hires with associate degrees. "You gotta learn the ropes," Dad said. 3 weeks later, Ethan waltzed in as Director of Business Development with a $120,000 salary, a company Tesla, and a corner office. I worked 80-hour weeks, streamlining supply chains and saving $500,000 on a high-rise project. At the board meeting, I presented my data. Dad nodded, said, "Good stuff," and moved on to Ethan's pitch for a company yacht party. I was invisible, but I kept pushing, believing my work would speak for itself. Looking back, I was naive. No amount of hustle could outshine Dad's blind faith in Ethan. But I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. I clung to the hope that my hard work at Bennett Builders would eventually force Dad to see my worth. I was wrong. The next few years were a masterclass in disappointment, each moment sharpening the sting of being overlooked. I threw myself into every project, determined to make myself undeniable. I negotiated with suppliers to cut costs, restructured workflows to hit deadlines, and even stepped in to save a $10 million office tower project when a foreman quit mid-build. My efforts paid off. Bennett Builders' profits climbed 15% in my first 2 years. But the praise? That went to Ethan. Ethan, who'd roll into the office at 10 a.m., hungover from another yacht party, was Dad's golden boy. He'd charm clients with his slick smile and a round of golf, but when it came to actual work, he was a liability. He botched a major bid by forgetting to factor in labor costs, costing us $300,000. I cleaned up the mess, working 20-hour days to renegotiate with the client. Dad's response? "Ethan's learning. Give him time." Time for what? To burn through more of Grandpa's legacy? I swallowed my frustration, thinking if I just worked harder, Dad would notice. He didn't. One project stands out like a scar. We were building a tech campus for a Seattle startup, a $25 million deal with a brutal timeline. For months in, Ethan approved a design change without consulting the engineers, swapping out steel beams for cheaper ones. The result? A structural flaw that halted construction. The client threatened to sue, and our reputation hung by a thread. Ethan was sick, that week conveniently unreachable. I stepped in, coordinating with architects, securing emergency funds, and supervising repairs. I barely slept for a month, but we finished on time, under budget. At the ribbon cutting, the client's CEO pulled me aside. "Olivia, you're the reason this didn't tank." I glowed, finally, recognition. Then Dad strode over, slapped Ethan's back, and said, "My boy knows how to deliver." Ethan, who'd been in Cabo during the crisis, just grinned. I stood there, invisible again, my chest tight with rage. That wasn't the only time. I built a smart building division from scratch, pitching IoT-integrated designs that landed us eco-conscious clients and boosted profits by 20%. Industry blogs raved about our innovation, but Dad credited Ethan in interviews, calling him the visionary. Ethan, who couldn't even spell IoT. I lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment, driving a 12-year-old Subaru, while Ethan bought a $2 million condo on Lake Washington, expensing steak dinners and leasing a Porsche through the company. When I pointed out the disparity, Mom said, "Ethan needs to project success for the brand." I was saving the company money, Ethan was spending it. Guess who got the pat on the head? The breaking point came 5 years into my tenure. A major hospital project went south after Ethan ignored my warnings about a shady subcontractor. Their shoddy work caused a $1.2 million delay, and the client filed a lawsuit. Ethan vanished to a networking event in Vegas, leaving me to face the fallout. I spent weeks negotiating settlements, rallying the crew, and convincing the client to stick with us. We salvaged the project, but the legal fees ate our quarterly profits. In Dad's office, I braced for a shred of gratitude. Instead, he said, "You did solid work, Olivia, but don't overstep again. Ethan's the lead here." I was stunned. Ethan's mistake had nearly bankrupted us, and I was overstepping? That night, I stared at my ceiling, replaying every slight, every dismissal. I'd given Bennett Builders my soul, but to Dad, I'd never be more than the backup. Then came the night that shattered everything. Mom invited Ethan and me to a family dinner at the mansion, saying Dad had a big announcement. I assumed it was about a new high-rise we'd bid on, or maybe the smart building expansion I'd been pushing. I arrived early, as always, with a bottle of Dad's favorite bourbon. The house gleamed, marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound, a testament to 60 years of Bennett's success. Ethan showed up 25 minutes late, no apology, bragging about his new speedboat. Mom fussed over him like he'd just won a Nobel Prize, while Dad beamed. No one asked about the $15 million contract I'd just closed. Over dessert, Dad cleared his throat. "I'm 65, he said. "It's time to plan the future of Bennett Builders." My pulse raced. This was it, the moment I'd worked 17 years for. I'd drafted transition plans, mapped growth strategies, ready to lead. "Susan and I are stepping back," he continued, "to enjoy retirement, travel, maybe get that cabin in Montana. We're handing the company to the next generation." I sat taller, my mind already organizing my first moves as CEO. Then Dad turned to Ethan. "Son, Bennett Builders is yours, full ownership, effective next month. The mansion, our investment accounts, all of it goes to you to secure the company's future." The room spun. My fork clattered to the plate. "What about me?" I choked out. Dad barely glanced my way. "We're giving you a severance package, 2 months' salary, and your company laptop. You're smart, Olivia. You'll land on your feet. 2 months' pay for 17 years? I found my voice, trembling. "I built this company with you. I saved projects Ethan tanked. I'm a Bennett too." Dad's face hardened. "Ethan's the future. He's a Bennett man, carrying the name. You'll marry someday, start a new family." Ethan smirked across the table. "Don't worry, sis. I might keep you on as an assistant." Mom stared at her plate, silent. I stood, my chair scraping the hardwood. "You're giving everything to someone who can't even read a blueprint?" Ethan's never finished a project on time, and half the crew won't work with him because he's clueless. Dad slammed his fist on the table. "Enough. This is final. The lawyers have the papers." I looked at Mom, begging for a shred of support. She mumbled, "We just want what's best for the company." "Best for the company?" I laughed, bitter. "Congratulations, Ethan," I said, voice icy. "Don't burn it all down." I grabbed my coat and walked out, ignoring Mom's calls to come back. In my car, I let the tears come not just for the company, but for the love I'd chased my whole life, only to be told I wasn't enough. The next morning, I emailed my resignation, effective immediately. Dad called, not to apologize, but to remind me of the non-compete clause, no working for rivals within 200 miles for 2 years. I wouldn't dream of it, I snapped, hanging up. I cleared out my office at dawn, 17 years of work packed into 3 boxes. As I locked the door, I made a vow. I'd never again let my worth be defined by people too blind to see it. Seattle held nothing for me anymore. It was time to start over. Seattle held nothing for me anymore. It was time to start over. I packed my life into a U-Haul and drove 170 miles south to Portland, Oregon, determined to rebuild. The non-compete clause chained me from joining a rival, so I launched Bennett Solutions, a construction consulting firm, from a cramped studio apartment. I kept the Bennett name out of defiance, proof I was still part of Grandpa's legacy. Those first months were brutal. Portland's construction scene was a boys' club, and a 34-year-old woman with no local clout? I was invisible. I cold-called 50 firms. 49 hung up. My savings dwindled to $2,000, barely covering rent and ramen. But I kept pushing, networking at industry meetups, pitching my expertise in fixing troubled projects. My break came when a desperate developer hired me to save a sinking $8 million retail plaza. The project was 6 months behind, bleeding cash. I worked 18-hour days, renegotiating with subcontractors, streamlining schedules, and catching design flaws the original manager missed. We finished 3 weeks early, saving $400,000. The client's glowing referral opened doors. Soon, I was Portland's fixer, the one you called when projects went south. By year 1, Bennett Solutions had 5 clients, a small office, and a reputation for results. I'd proven I didn't need Dad's approval to succeed. Meanwhile, whispers from Seattle painted a grim picture. Ethan was torching Bennett Builders. He fired veteran managers, replacing them with his frat buddies, who knew more about craft beer than construction. My smart building division? Scrapped because Ethan called it too nerdy. He underbid contracts to look like a hotshot, locking the company into deals guaranteed to lose millions. Employees started quitting. Clients bailed. I got a call from Carla, our old office manager. "Liv, it's a circus," she said. "Ethan's leasing a private jet while we're dodging vendor lawsuits." I thanked her but stayed firm. Their mess wasn't my problem. Still, a part of me felt vindicated. Every failure proved my worth, even if Dad wouldn't admit it. I built a new life in Portland, a cozy condo, a tight-knit team, and clients who valued me. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Then, one rainy Tuesday, my phone lit up with a text from Mom, "Mansion's in foreclosure. Please, Liv, we need you." After 3 years of silence, they were begging. I stared at the message, heart pounding. The empire I'd helped build was crumbling, and the brother they'd crowned was nowhere to be found. What came next would change everything. What came next would change everything. That text from Mom, "Mansion's in foreclosure. Please, Liv, we need you," hung in the air like a storm cloud over my Portland office. For 3 years, I'd built Bennett Solutions into a respected name, proving I didn't need Dad's empire to shine. Now, the family that cast me aside was begging for a lifeline. I could have ignored it. Part of me wanted to, but curiosity and maybe a flicker of loyalty to Grandpa's legacy pulled me in. I needed to know how bad it was. So I called Mom back, bracing for the worst. She answered on the first ring, voice cracking. "Liv, thank God. We're in deep trouble." Over the next hour, she laid out a disaster worse than I'd imagined. Bennett Builders was $5 million in debt, bleeding cash from Ethan's reckless deals. The Puget Sound mansion, paid off a decade ago, had a $900,000 mortgage they couldn't cover, with foreclosure looming in weeks. Lawsuits from clients and suppliers piled up, and the company's bank accounts were frozen. Employees hadn't been paid in a month. Half the crew had walked out. Dad, at 68, was back on job sites, trying to salvage projects. Mom's blood pressure was spiking from the stress, landing her in urgent care twice. And Ethan? "He's in Hawaii," Mom admitted, "meeting investors," he says. I snorted. "Investors don't meet on yachts in Maui." I pressed for details. Ethan's mismanagement was a wrecking ball. He'd fired our top estimators, replacing them with college buddies who couldn't read a balance sheet. He scrapped my smart building division, calling it a money pit, losing us eco-clients who'd brought in 20% of revenue. He signed contracts at a loss, underbidding to win big, oblivious to rising material costs. One skyscraper project collapsed, literally, when Ethan swapped out certified steel for a cheaper knockoff, triggering a $2 million lawsuit. Subcontractors, unpaid for 90 days, refused to show up. The company's fleet of trucks sat idle, repossessed after Ethan redirected maintenance funds to lease a private jet. "A jet," I snapped. "While crews went unpaid?" Mom went silent, then mumbled he thought it'd impress clients. Dad got on the line, his voice thinner than I remembered. "Liv, we need you back. The company's dying." I leaned back, staring at Portland's skyline. "You gave it all to Ethan," I said, "told me I wasn't part of the future. Why should I fix his mess?" Dad sighed. "We made a mistake, but 60 families depend on this company. They don't deserve to lose their jobs." He was pulling the guilt card, and it worked just enough. I didn't know them, but those workers, people I'd known for years, didn't deserve Ethan's fallout. I set my terms, voice steady. "If I help, it's on my conditions. I want 60% ownership and total control, financial, operational, everything. Ethan answers to me or he's out." Dad hesitated. "That's steep, Olivia." I didn't budge. You're asking me to leave a thriving business to save a sinking ship. 60% or I walk. Mom jumped in, pleading, we'll talk to the lawyers. I added, and get Ethan off his yacht. If I'm in, he works under me, no exceptions. I hung up, my hands shaking. 3 years ago, I'd have jumped to help, no questions asked. Now I knew my worth. If they wanted my skills, they'd pay the price. The next day, a Seattle Times headline hit my inbox. Bennett Builders, from legacy to ruin under heirs mismanagement. The article ripped into Ethan's jet leases, failed projects, and the skyscraper collapse, quoting furious ex-clients. Social media was worse. Former employees posted about unpaid wages, and a viral ex-thread called Ethan the poster boy for nepotism. The public shaming lit a fire under Mom and Dad. Mom texted, lawyers drafting papers. Please, Liv, come home. I booked a flight to Seattle, carrying 2 contracts, one for consulting at my standard $500 per hour rate, the other for 60% ownership. I wasn't sure which they'd sign, or if I even wanted them to. Driving to the mansion, I saw the truth in the peeling paint and overgrown lawn. The Bennett Empire was on its knees, and I held the keys to its survival. The Bennett Empire was on its knees, and I held the keys to its survival. As I pulled up to the Puget Sound mansion, the faded grandeur hit hard, cracked driveway, wilted hedges, no trace of the proud Bennett Builders sign. Inside, Mom hugged me tightly, eyes red from crying. Dad stood stiffly, looking a decade older, his usual confidence gone. Ethan was absent, no surprise. He's on his way, Dad muttered, checking his watch. I didn't wait. I spread my contracts on the dining table and demanded every financial record, bank statements, loan docs, lawsuits, tax notices. Show me the damage, I said, voice flat. For 3 hours, we waded through a nightmare, $5.2 million in debt, for pending lawsuits and a foreclosure notice on the mansion dated 10 days out. Ethan's fingerprints were everywhere, $200,000 in client entertainment charges, a $1.5 million jet lease, and a $500,000 investment in a buddy's failed startup. Ethan strolled in at 8 p.m., tanned from Hawaii, Rolex glinting. Didn't know we were having a family roast, he quipped, smirking. I didn't flinch. Sit down, Ethan. We're discussing how you ran a 60-year legacy into the ground. His grin faded as I slid a spreadsheet across the table, detailing his spending, yacht rentals, Vegas trips, the jet, while workers went unpaid. This is embezzlement, I said. Call it what you want, he shot back. I was CO. I made calls. Dad cut in, voice low. Bad calls, son. You've cost us everything. It was the first time I'd heard him criticize Ethan. The room went still. I laid out 2 options. I consult at $500 an hour, no ownership, or I take 60% of Bennett Builders with full control. Ethan scoffed. You're not stealing my company. I raised an eyebrow. Your company? The one with no cash, no clients, and a foreclosure notice? That one. Mom's voice trembled. Liv, we need you. Dad nodded, defeated. We'll sign the ownership papers. Ethan lunged forward. This is insane. I'm the Bennett. Dad slammed his hand down. Enough. You had your chance, Ethan. Olivia's our only shot. Mom's eyes welled up as Dad signed the contract, transferring 60% to me. Just like that, I owned the company I'd been denied. Now what? Ethan muttered, slumping. Now you work for me, I said. Client relations, no financial access. One misstep, you're out. I turned to Mom and Dad. Your advisors only. No decisions. We start tomorrow, 6 a.m. The next morning, I walked into Bennett Builders headquarters, a shell of its former self, dusty desks, flickering lights, no hum of activity. Ethan showed up at 7:15, coffee in hand, no apology. I didn't waste breath. This is a rescue mission, I told them. No egos, no excuses. I demoted Ethan to sales, canceled his company cards, and listed the jet for sale. Mom and Dad were relegated to sharing historical data, nothing more. I called back key veterans Carla, our old office manager, and Javier, our best estimator, who'd quit under Ethan's reign. Both agreed to return, trusting my vision. I slashed overhead, selling Ethan's buddies useless startup stake and downsizing the office lease. I met with creditors, leveraging my Portland reputation to negotiate payment plans. 2 clients, burned by Ethan's flops, agreed to new contracts after I personally guaranteed oversight. It was grueling 16-hour days, constant fires, but progress showed. Ethan, stripped of power, surprised me. He landed a $200,000 deal with a small developer, his charm finally useful under my watch. I didn't trust him, but I let him keep the role. 3 months in, we were treading water, not thriving, but alive. The mansion was still at risk, and lawsuits loomed. Then a new threat emerged. Cascade Construction, a rival, offered to buy Bennett Builders for $1 million, a tenth of its peak value. I had 48 hours to counter, or we'd lose everything. The clock was ticking, and I wasn't about to let Ethan's mess bury Grandpa's dream. Cascade Construction's $1 million offer to buy Bennett Builders was a slap in the face, a predatory move to snatch a 60-year legacy for pennies. With 48 hours to counter, I dove into action, knowing the stakes: save the company or watch it vanish. The Seattle Times article and viral X threads bashing Ethan's failures had turned Bennett Builders into a punchline, but I saw a chance to flip the narrative. Public shame was pressure, sure, but it also meant eyes were on us, clients, creditors, even Cascade. If I could show progress, I could buy time. I called an emergency meeting with my rehired veterans, Carla and Javier. At 7 p.m. Ethan slouched in, late as usual, muttering about the vultures at Cascade. Focus, I snapped. We need a plan to keep the bank on our side and scare Cascade off. I laid out the strategy: secure a small but high-profile contract to prove we were still viable, renegotiate the mansion's mortgage to delay foreclosure, and counter Cascade's offer with a public show of strength. Javier suggested pitching a local hospital expansion we'd lost under Ethan's watch. "They liked you, Liv," he said. "They might bite if you lead." I nodded, assigning Ethan to charm the hospital board under my script. By midnight, I was on the phone with the bank, pitching a revised repayment plan backed by my Portland firm's cash flow. They gave us a 30-day extension, but only if we landed a new contract by week's end. Next, I reached out to the hospital's CEO, a no-nonsense woman who'd respected my work. I pitched a lean, tech-forward proposal, reviving my smart building concepts Ethan had axed. She agreed to meet, impressed by my transparency about our troubles. Ethan, to his credit, nailed the follow-up, sticking to my talking points. By Friday, we had a $3 million contract, small, but enough to signal life in Bennett Builders. I leaked the win to a sympathetic Times reporter who ran a follow-up. Bennett Builders fights back under new leadership. Cascade's 48-hour deadline loomed. I met their CEO, a smug suit named Greg Walsh, at a downtown coffee shop. "Nice try with the hospital deal," he said, "but $1 million's generous for a corpse." I slid a folder across the table: our new contract, bank extension, and a PR plan to rebuild our brand. "We're not dead," I said. "Raise your offer to $10 million, or we'll outlast you." He laughed but didn't counter. I knew he'd blink. Cascade's investors hated risky bets. Sure enough, Walsh withdrew the offer, citing market concerns. The mansion was next. I negotiated a 6-month mortgage forbearance, buying Mom and Dad time to sell and downsize. They moved to a modest condo, using early sale proceeds to settle a $200,000 lawsuit. Back at Bennett Builders, I tightened operations, firing Ethan's last frat bro hire, digitizing records, and training staff on cost controls. Ethan, humbled by the hospital win, showed up on time for once, pitching a $4 million contract. I watched him closely, still wary but open to his effort. For months in, We'd cut debt to $3 million and restored payroll. Clients trickled back, drawn by my track record in Portland. The public tide turned too. A local ex-influencer posted, "Olivia Bennett's saving her family's company after her brother tanked it." Hashtag boss move. Comments poured in, praising my grit. Mom called, tearful. "I'm sorry we didn't see you sooner, Liv." Dad admitted, "I was wrong about Ethan. You're the real Bennett." Their words felt good, but I didn't need them anymore. I'd built my worth from scratch. Still, a bigger test was coming, one that would push me to my limits and force Ethan to face his past. A bigger test was coming, one that would push me to my limits and force Ethan to face his past. Just as Bennett Builders started to stabilize, a bombshell hit. The $2 million lawsuit from the skyscraper collapse, tied to Ethan's decision to use substandard cement, resurfaced with new evidence implicating Ethan in a kickback scheme. The plaintiff's lawyer contacted me, demanding Ethan testify in court or face criminal fraud charges. I confronted him at the office. "You took bribes to cut corners?" I asked, slamming the documents down. Ethan paled, stammering, "It was just business, Liv." Business? This could bankrupt us and land him in jail. I had to act fast. I hired a crisis PR firm to control the narrative and a legal team to negotiate a settlement. To fund it, I sold my Portland condo, pouring $300,000 into the defense. Ethan offered nothing, dodging accountability. I gave him an ultimatum: testify and take responsibility, or I'd cut him out entirely. For the first time, he looked scared, agreeing to cooperate. In court, Ethan admitted his role, voice shaky, as evidence was presented. The judge approved a $1.5 million settlement, sparing us collapse but draining our reserves. Back at Bennett Builders, I used the crisis to push reforms, mandatory ethics training, transparent bidding, and stricter vendor vetting. Ethan, chastened, stuck to sales, landing a $500,000 deal under my oversight. The company clawed forward, debt down to $2 million. Mom and Dad, now in their condo, thanked me quietly, their trust in me cemented. But the real victory was mine. I'd turned Ethan's betrayal into a stronger foundation, proving no scandal could break what I'd rebuilt. No scandal could break what I'd rebuilt, but the fight wasn't over. With Bennett Builders' debt at $2 million and the skyscraper lawsuit settled, I faced a new hurdle: restoring the company's reputation to attract bigger clients. Seattle's construction scene was cutthroat, and our name still carried Ethan's stench of failure. I leaned on my Portland playbook, pitching our revamped smart building division to a major tech firm, Nexus Innovations, for a $12 million headquarters project. I worked tirelessly, tailoring a proposal with cutting-edge IoT designs and a transparent budget, emphasizing our new ethics protocols. Ethan, under strict supervision, joined the pitch, his charm polished but leashed. Nexus's CEO, wary of our past, grilled us. I owned Ethan's mistakes up front, showcasing our reforms. We won the contract, a game changer that slashed debt to $1 million and signaled Bennett Builders was back. I reinstated Carla and Javier as senior managers, empowering them to train new hires. Ethan, showing rare humility, closed 2 more deals, sticking to my guidelines. Mom and Dad, settled in their condo, started volunteering at a community center, their pride in me unspoken but clear. I hired a COO from Portland to run daily operations, allowing me to focus on strategy. 6 months post-scandal, we posted a $200,000 profit, our first in years. A local ex-post went viral. Olivia Bennett's turnaround of Bennett Builders is legendary. #redemption. The company was stable, but I wasn't done. A final challenge loomed, one that would test whether Ethan's change was real and force me to decide if family could ever truly heal. A final challenge loomed, one that would test whether Ethan's change was real and force me to decide if family could ever truly heal. With Bennett Builders profitable and debt at $1 million, Ethan approached me, eyes earnest, asking for a bigger role. "I've learned. Live," he said, handing me a detailed sales plan. It was solid, but trust was thin. I gave him a test: lead a $5 million condo project under Javier's oversight. Ethan delivered, on time, under budget, no drama. For the first time, I saw a spark of the brother he could have been. But healing wasn't easy. At a quiet dinner, Mom and Dad apologized, admitting their bias had blinded them. "You're our legacy," Dad said, voice thick. Ethan nodded, quieter now. "I didn't deserve it, Liv." Their words mended something, but scars remained. I kept 60% ownership, hired more staff, and expanded the smart building division. Bennett Builders thrived, debt cleared by year's end. An ex-post celebrated. Olivia Bennett rebuilt an empire. #legend. I'd won, but the real victory was knowing my worth didn't need their validation. One last surprise waited, one that would redefine our family's future forever. One last surprise waited, one that would redefine our family's future forever. With Bennett Builders debt-free and thriving, I was ready to scale back my role in Seattle, confident in the COO and team I'd built. The smart building division was landing $20 million contracts, and our reputation had soared, with industry awards rolling in. Ethan, now a reliable sales lead, had earned a sliver of my trust, but I kept him on a short leash. Mom and Dad, settled in their condo, were rebuilding their lives, their apologies a quiet backdrop to our new dynamic. I thought the worst was behind us, but life had other plans. One morning, Carla rushed into my office, face pale. "Liv, check X. There's a whistleblower post about us." A former subcontractor, fired for shoddy work under Ethan's reign, had leaked internal emails alleging Bennett Builders had dodged safety regulations on a 2023 project to cut costs. The post was gaining traction, with thousands of shares and comments demanding investigations. The project predated my leadership, but the timing was brutal. Nexus Innovations, our biggest client, was finalizing a $30 million deal. If they pulled out, we'd lose half our revenue. I called an emergency meeting. Ethan, uncharacteristically serious, admitted he'd approved the subcontractor's work without proper checks. "I didn't know they'd lie about certifications," he said, head down. I didn't have time for his regret. I acted fast, hiring a third-party auditor to review every project since 2020. Transparency was our only shot at credibility. I drafted a public statement, posted on X and our website, admitting the oversight, outlining our reforms, and inviting regulators to inspect our sites. It was risky. Opening ourselves to scrutiny could uncover more issues, but hiding would be worse. I flew to Nexus's headquarters, meeting their CEO face-to-face. "We fixed the gaps," I said, handing over the auditor's preliminary report. "You have my word. No corners cut." She agreed to pause, not cancel, the deal pending the audit's final results. Back in Seattle, I grilled Ethan. "You knew the stakes back then. Why risk it?" He confessed to pressure from Dad to hit profit targets, cutting corners to prove himself. It stung, but I saw the truth. Ethan wasn't the only one at fault. Dad's obsession with the Bennett man myth had pushed him to reckless choices. I called Dad, voice steady. "You set Ethan up to fail by expecting him to be you. We're cleaning this up together." He didn't argue, just said, "Do what you need to live." The audit cleared us of systemic issues, but flagged 2 minor violations from Ethan's era, costing $100,000 in fines. I paid them from company funds, avoiding further lawsuits. Nexus signed the $30 million contract, impressed by our accountability. I used the whistleblower crisis to double down on reforms, mandatory safety certifications for all subcontractors, and a compliance officer role, filled by Carla. Ethan, shaken by the fallout, volunteered for extra training, a move I cautiously respected. Mom and Dad donated to a local housing nonprofit, a small step to rebuild community trust. A year after the crisis, Bennett Builders was stronger than ever, with $50 million in annual revenue. An ex-post summed it up. Olivia Bennett turned a scandal into a comeback. Hashtag unstoppable. But the real win wasn't the numbers, it was the family we'd become. Flawed but honest, united by truth, not tradition. Still, one final question remained. Could I let go and trust them to carry on? Could I let go and trust them to carry on? With Bennett Builders at $50 million in revenue, I faced my final hurdle, stepping back. The company was my heart, rebuilt from Ethan's ashes, but clinging to control risked stifling its future. I promoted Carla to CEO, her steady hand proven through crises. Ethan, now a disciplined sales director, earned a 10% stake for his growth, but I kept 60%. Mom and Dad, humbled, became community advocates, their faith in me unwavering. I returned to Portland, expanding Bennett Solutions, but stayed as board chair, guiding from afar. A viral ex-post declared, Olivia Bennett's not just a boss, she's a legend. Hashtag Empire Reborn. The praise felt good, but my true win was freedom from needing it.